Hi, I'm Shannon Ryan. We're here tonight with President of the IFC, Dan Combs. Hi, Dan.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great, thanks. How are you?
Good.
So you're coming to the end of your term. What is the legacy you hope to leave behind?
I think that there's a lot of change coming to the fraternity community, and my hope is that we still preserve the student-run aspect of our governing system. That would be my biggest hope for the executive board moving forward, and I have high hopes for what they're going to be able to accomplish.
So it depends on how you choose to gauge this, but you're the largest IFC in the nation. What compelled you to take on such a large responsibility, and how do you handle that responsibility?
Yeah, so my path to this role is actually a pretty unique one. I began in my sophomore year. I started out on a committee that was recently formed. It was looking at reforming a lot of the bylaws and just making the Constitution a working document. A lot of the language in that document had become archaic and really was out of date. So I served on this committee, and after a semester we presented our findings to all the presidents of the fraternities. And I was actually chosen from the 21 members of this committee to present those findings. And conveniently that night, after we presented, was also the call for nominations for the top 3 positions, which are president, executive vice president, and administrative vice president. So at this meeting, I was nominated for the administrative vice president position. This is pretty rare for a sophomore to be nominated for one of the top 3 positions, but I decided to take a chance, and I went forward with the election and ended up winning. So from there, I served for a year as the administrative vice president, which is essentially the treasurer of the IFC. And then after a year, I decided that my time serving the IFC had not been fully fulfilled, and I wanted to continue. So I again ran for election for the office of president.
You had mentioned that some of your findings were archaic when you reviewed the bylaws. When you came into office, one of the things you said that you had wanted to change was the bylaws. How did you do this? What changes did you make during your time?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's a lot. And a lot of times when people think of our bylaws, they think of the social policies. But there's really a whole lot more that goes into our Constitution than just what governs our social functions. But one of the things I did, and I learned this from when I served on that committee, is I reestablished that committee to have all different perspectives, from big chapters, from small chapters, from executive board members, from just your average newly initiated member, looking at what is contained in our bylaws. And we worked on this project for about 6 months, going through them and having different feedback about what could be changed, what could be improved. And ultimately we had a President's Council where we voted in or struck down a few, but voted in most of the policy changes, and then reworked the document so that it was actually applicable to how we actually function as a fraternity community. So when I went for some of the things that were archaic, we had things in there that, even just terminology that said mixers. No one calls any of our social events mixers. So that's an example of just some of the language usage was a bit out of date. Other things included things that we just simply don't do anymore, or the technology has changed, and we wanted to kind of revamp the Constitution to reflect that.
Okay, thank you. So we touched on earlier how you're the largest IFC in the nation, depending on how you look at it.
Right.
With size comes power. A lot of the sexual assaults and physical assaults that have been occurring on campus lately, a large percentage of those have occurred at fraternities. Do you believe that as such a large organization, you have a social obligation to help combat that? And do you believe that there's a correlation between Greek life and assault?
So to answer your first question, do we have a social obligation? I think we absolutely do. I've actually joined a group called Men Against Violence. It's a very small organization, but they're doing a lot to kind of raise awareness and education on campus about sexual assault. It's a group of men who actually in the past have gone to fraternities and sororities, as well as other student organizations, but they've gone to these orgs and presented really the issue of sexual assault for a lot of times the first time to some of these members, and really defined it and what all it encompasses, and how to handle one, how to be an active bystander to prevent sexual assault from occurring, but 2, how to handle when a friend comes to you and says that they've been sexually assaulted, because there's really a severe lack of education in all these realms. I think that when you ask if there's a correlation between Greek life and sexual assault, I think that my answer would be that there's a correlation between alcohol use and sexual assault. And that's really the main issue, is that we do have members who abuse alcohol or other drugs, and they're not drinking responsibly, and they're not behaving the way our values and our creed dictates that we should. And of course we have our own system as far as holding the chapters accountable, but the issue is, I'm sure you're well aware with sexual assault, is that it's very often not reported. And often with fraternities in particular, or other large organizations such as sports teams, we see that people are scared to report it because they're fearful of the backlash they may receive from other members of their own org or from that org. And I think that this is an issue that we absolutely need to combat.
Thank you. So what do you hope to see from your successor, Rick Groves?
Well, I think the first thing I'd like to see is a quick transition, because the most important thing I can do for him at this point is bring him up to speed and make sure that he is as educated as he can be when he goes forward and making all these decisions. I'd also like to see him increase conversations around the community. So our presence, or I'll say our relationship with the State College Police, with the borough, with the university, has long been established and has been continually improving. But there's a number of other entities that have not been included in conversations to date. That includes Center Code Enforcement, the Alpha Fire Department, LifeLink, a number of these other entities that unfortunately work with the fraternities a lot of times in a negative way, that we would like to start having positive conversations and how do we fix some of these issues that are reoccurring. And I also just think that the best thing for me to admit is that Rick may be more competent than myself. And as difficult as that is to say, I am really excited to see see what he can do with the position. And I think that, that is what you should want, to have someone better than you succeeding you. And I do believe I have that. So as difficult as that is to say, I think he's going to do a great job.
And if there's anything you could change from your time, this kind of ties into the previous question, what would it be?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things that come to mind. Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm certainly in this position. I've made mistakes, and it's sometimes hard to admit those mistakes, but there may have been a few times where I failed in my duty in upholding certain relationships, and I maybe didn't give 100%, or maybe got frustrated too easily, and let some relationships deteriorate that really shouldn't have. I think that going back and doing it again, I would have given a little bit more effort to try and maintain those relationships.
You're a senior. Your term's coming to an end. What will you take away from this experience into the real world?
Oh, wow. There's a lot. I certainly learned how to write emails a little more professionally, and also handle a large volume of emails in any given day. I think the biggest thing that I learned that I can directly apply to a job is how to handle myself under pressure. A lot of times in this position, though I have explicitly defined duties, there's many more that aren't. And I never know when I'm going to get a phone call that says there's been a very serious incident and I need to respond quickly, I need to provide a statement, I need to talk to administrators or talk to the media, and those kinds of high pressure, intense situations are the things that have taught me how to maintain my composure and really just work through any situation that I'm thrown into. And I think that going into my field in consulting, that's really what you're doing, is professional problem solving. And I've learned how to put out a lot of fires here in the IFC, and I hope that remains with me as I go forward.
All right. Dan Combs, thank you.
Thank you so much, Shannon. It was a pleasure.
And be sure to watch PSN News live every Monday night at 7.